Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, January 11th, 2019.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
Hockey World. Today is Friday.
I'm What's going from Sportsology. Sorry, that was me.
Wow.
It's okay. No, you have to. And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. No, you have to keep that open because I know you were doing that for the chat, and we want some interactive stuff to go on. Because during the show, what we're going to do here, and we'll probably do this from now a lot from now until the trade deadline, is we're going to sort of play GM here using our rumor chart and sort of try to negotiate what we think would be a fair deal for certain players on the rumor chart. So we'll be doing that in a little bit, but we're going to start off the news with the announcement from his agent that Rick Nash, and this isn't a big surprise because he had held off signing a 3-year contract over the summer because there were concerns about concussions. He had a concussion after he was traded from the Rangers to the Bruins, and he was basically a shadow of his former self in the playoffs after he came back. He really didn't have much of an effect when he played against the Leafs or the Lightning, but Rick Nash has decided to hang him up. And what is he, Russ, 34?
Yeah, right in that range.
Yeah, and I was at the draft in Toronto where he was drafted first overall by Columbus.
I didn't know you then, but I was there.
No, yeah, and I just
wanted to point that out. I don't know why. Maybe life was better then. I'm not sure what the reason is.
Guilt by association, but okay. Since you and Jan were observers of the team that he played most of the last half of his career with, I think he's a great player. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he's put up those kinds of stats. I think he was a very good player, a very good number 1 overall pick, scored 50 goals, power forward, power winger. In the second half of his career with the Rangers, he had a couple decent seasons, but he really seemed to slow down, and I don't think he was anywhere close to being the impact player that he was in the first half of his career.
No, and when we used to talk about it, we used to preface it. We knew that concussions were taking some sort of toll. Now we know that it really took a toll. And I do think he's a Hall of Famer because if you go from like 2014 on, you will realize that, hey, you know what? His diminished play was because of everything that happened in hockey to him. And while he still played great defensively, he was nowhere near the player he was. I used to talk about the trigger on him where even, late in 2014 it was going where he couldn't get a shot up quick enough if he was in low just to get it past the goalie. Like it took an extra second. And I saw it happen to Lindros too. That's the only reason I was able to recognize it in Nash. But he was a great player. If you look at his international numbers, they're strong. I don't think you always have to be a point-a-game guy, and I do think you have to take into account, how many concussions did he really suffer? How much did it take away from his career? I think after the 42-goal year that he had with the Rangers, I do think this is the reason it started to go downhill. And it was gradual. It was year after year, and we talked about it, and fans, unfortunately, would kill him for it because of the amount of money he was making. But, again, now we know what the deal is.
I'll give my take, and Russ and I have been pretty on sync with this. So if you look at his numbers, right? So he came to the Rangers. The Rangers got him to probably pair with Marian Gaborik to be their big scorer because they needed one more, and they gave up Artem Anisimov, Brandon Dubitsky, Tim Erickson in the 1, and they got back a 3, which they used to get Pavel Buchnevich. So in terms of the trade, the return on the trade was clearly better than what they gave up, in my opinion. He had 42 points his first year as a Rangers in 44 games in the lockout season. The following season, he was injured, had his first concussion really as a Ranger. Then, as Russ said, he came back and had the 42-goal season. But the thing you're going to remember the most of him, unfortunately, is the Game 5. Right, the Game 5 overtime against LA. And Russ talked a little about the trigger. If he triggers that quicker, a millimeter higher, millimeter lower, that puck doesn't go off the shaft of the defenseman's stick, goes in the net, and you're coming back for Game 6 at the Garden. Where, in my opinion, the Rangers probably would have won at home and sent it to a Game 7, but he would have been hailed in Rangers land because of it. You talk about his two-way play, right? You look at what Mike Babcock did for him, turned him into a penalty killer in the Olympics, made him into more of a 200-foot player, and even though he was diminished offensively, he was one of those guys that can make a difference on both ends of the ice. He became an exceptional defensive forward along with his offensive skills, and those skills diminished because of the concussions, especially when you look back his early years in Columbus, the puck handling, the stick handling, what he was able to do on the break, how he physically held guys off with his body and his arms to create space to get that shot off, how he was able to dangle the puck and create room. He became, unfortunately, a guy who was known more for his contract than anything else with the Rangers, and the Rangers fans kind of took him to task for it. And I kept saying, look, he is doing everything but scoring on the ice. The guy is doing literally everything. He's playing a 200-foot game. He's setting up his teammates. He just, unfortunately, because of the concussions, doesn't have that capacity to score as he used to. But the guy was a 200-foot player. Ended up with 437 goals in 1,060 games, 368 assists, 2 gold medals, a guy who was known as a really good penalty killer also. And he went to Boston. He actually played well initially until he suffered that additional concussion, which basically ended his season in his career. But he might have made a decent difference for Boston if he had been healthy. So to me, I view it as a what might have been as a Ranger, but also will view him as one of the best Rangers since the lockout in general, since the first lockout in 2005, and a guy who I was a big defender of, and a guy who I was a big fan of going back to when he was in Columbus.
And Peter, I look at him and the situation. I mean, he was out there. Supposedly, he had a 3-year contract offered to him, and he begged off on July 1st. I was thinking if there was a possibility, and I'm getting an echo here. I don't know who's got the player in the back, but yeah. But if he had decided to continue his career, I thought with the cap room that they had and the relationship he had with Babcock in the 2 Olympics, I thought there was a possibility with that the Leafs might go there and try to sign him on a 1-year deal, sort of like Matt Sundin in Vancouver after he went away from the Leafs. That option is closed. But what do you think in terms of Nash and his impact on the game and his legacy, I guess?
I want Jan Levine to be my marketing rep when I go into arbitration. Wow, that was a real good sell job. Rick Nash will always be known as the guy who needed help because he couldn't do it alone. I'm your contrarian. He had heaps of expectations on him and an all-world talented guy. And he is, you look on YouTube, there's Rick Nash highlights all over the place. The record of success in his career speaks for itself, though. He couldn't get teams over the hump. He was expected to, he couldn't. That's not always his fault. He was in Columbus. He played with a ton of duds. The franchise was run horribly, and Rick Nash took the fall for it. That's unfair because it wasn't deserved. But right. I don't. And here's your Eastern Western bias. Didn't see him a lot. Saw him in the Olympics. Saw him do a spinorama once in a while. Like, you know what? His NHL totals at 1,060 games, 437 goals. Didn't even crack 500 goals. Come on, Rick. 368 assists, 805 points.
Somebody else.
You know what? I'm just saying, there's a lot of hype about this. I think it's
side too. I mean, I think what Peter's saying is valid.
I know.
I'm not saying he's not bad. What I'm saying is I think Rick Nash, for his career, the point I'm getting to is I'm going to balance this out, is that there was a lot of expectation and a lot of things that came along with him. Mm-hmm. And somehow it never came together for Rick. And I feel kind of bad for him because he sort of got locked into Columbus. He signed a big deal.
Yep.
They could never really get anything there. The first time they made the playoffs, they were out in 4 games, swept in 4 games. It just never arrived for him like it should have. And I think if you're a player, if you're someone and you're coming into the league and you have an agent and you have all these things and expectations, Rick Nash is going to be the kind of player you should look back on and say, do I want to end up going down this road if my organization isn't solid? And the Columbus Blue Jackets, what they are now, was not what they were when Rick Nash came in. And it's unfortunate because that's tainted him for a lot of people, right or wrong.
You can't always control that, though. Like, it's easy to say that.
Russ, anyone goes for a job interview, you should be interviewing the people who are going to pay you as much as they're interviewing you. That doesn't change. That should be doubly so when you're dealing with $30-40 million in your time.
What you haven't factored in is, so let's say you are going for a job interview, and let's say you're at your current job here, and I'm offering you a job in New York, and I'm going to give you, I don't know, $20,000 or more a year to go. You're going to say, I don't know, I'm going to have to uproot my whole family. The kids are in school, they're this and that. Those are big factors as to why players get stuck in certain places.
No, they are. I'm just saying,
they're not single. They've got other considerations.
Well, and just consider this though. I mean, and I can't remember what year it was exactly, but it was the year before he was becoming a UFA. And as usual, there was a lot of talk, since he's a kid from the Toronto area, of him coming back and like Stamkos, like other players, being the savior, the one who comes to Toronto, and the centerpiece player that signs in Toronto or gets traded to Toronto. And from what I heard, he wanted no part of being the center of attention in Toronto. It's a completely different thing to go to the Rangers, because you could be Brian Leetch, you could be Chris Drury, you could be whoever, and you could blend into the woodwork in New York, because there's the Yankees, there's the Mets, there's the Jets. You can do that. But in Toronto, and Tavares is the first one. Well, Clarkson, but that was a dismal failure. That the big guy came to Toronto and has been able to handle it, and has been handled it with greatly. Rick Nash wanted no part of that. So, I mean, I can't really, if that wasn't the thing that he wanted to deal with, I can't.
For the guy's psyche, right? Like I don't always fault athletes for that, simply because if that's in your psyche and you can't shake that, it still doesn't mean you're not worthy of something or weren't really good. Sure. Like Joe Thornton is most likely never going to win anything. He has more points than Rick Nash, but he also stayed a lot healthier than Rick Nash. Mm-hmm. So because he didn't win anything, does he not go in the Hall of Fame? No, he's going in first ballot. But the idea is you can't always control that. I'm sure Tony Esposito, when he was posting all those shutouts, would love to have won a lot more Stanley Cups in his life, but he didn't. But he still made it to the Hall of Fame. I still think Rick Nash will get there.
You think Rick Nash will get there?
I mean, Peter, I can't disagree with you. I mean, failed expectations is clearly going to be part of the story that goes along with Nash. I mean,
right or wrong, and I want to add that in, right or wrong. That's just part of his story.
Right. I mean, he was brought in to be the big gun to get the Rangers over the top. And in most part, if you look at his playoff numbers paled in comparison to the expectations. And this is what I said. Yeah. He literally did everything else but score. And granted, he was brought in to be a scorer, and save for that 1 year where he had 42 goals, you can argue that he didn't necessarily live up to the mantra of what he was brought in for, to score. And that's part of what everybody recognizes with him, and the way he's portrayed by a lot of Ranger fans.
And the funny thing is that if he would have been on the Columbus Blue Jackets of today with a supporting cast, with a goaltender like Bobrovsky, with a good defense, with some secondary scoring, he probably would have had success in Columbus. The team that he had back then, there was not a lot of support. There was
It was him and Derek Brassard.
Right, and that was about it.
And John Moore was their top defenseman. Like, what did they really have?
Yeah. Okay, so let's move from that to the other Columbus-related story. And I don't know how much we can, really reveal on this, because there's not a lot of information out there about what exactly happened. But Sergei Bobrovsky was scratched. He was not suspended, but basically it sounds like it was a double secret suspension. And Jonas Carpasalo was the goaltender against the Nashville Predators. The Blue Jackets won 4-3 in overtime. And now today, basically, Jarmo Kekalainen says, the whole situation's been resolved, move on, blah, blah, blah. But nobody knows what exactly happened to bring this about. The only thing we can say, and Peter, I'll go to you first, is does this mean that Bobrovsky is now somebody who gets traded before February 25th, or does that likelihood increase, or is it basically status quo?
So I don't know. This is such a weird one. There's some I saw on Twitter today, and I can't remember who tweeted it, but there was a quote from someone that said Bobrovsky was telling people in the summer that he was coming back. I can't remember. It came from someone. It was a retweet of something from someone in the general hockey media. Yeah. And it seemed like a fairly plausible quote, like in that there seemed to be some, I wouldn't throw this under the rug and say, nah, it's BS. But, everything changes, right? And this was weird. But you know what? Again, there's only about, there's a few people who know what really went on. We just know the result of what happened, and it could be completely understandable. You violate a team rule, you do something, there's a price to pay. And we've seen it happen before, maybe a few times with some players, and off you go. Maybe that's probably all we should be reading it. But because he's a free agent, because they're coming up to the trade deadline, we're going to put a little fire on this and see if anything sticks.
Well, I don't think we're putting a fire on it, Peter. I spoke to a lot of different writers yesterday at the game, and the consensus was they do feel like something went on with Torts, and we don't know what, and we'll never know what. And so, you know, and that's why I think it could be just something what we would consider sort of innocuous, as, you know, for a lack of a better term, like telling a guy to drop dead, and as your coach, right? So you shouldn't say that to him, and it might have been a curse of some sort. We don't know. But the idea is, if that is the case, Torts' contract is secure. Yeah. So it wouldn't look good for Bob coming back after this year if there was that. Now, again, guys do get over disagreements with coaches, but again, this is John Tortorella too, who has a history with goaltenders. It wasn't just me. I asked a lot of people, and that's what they read out of this whole thing.
And Peter, the funny thing is, the report that you heard, or, you know, sort of secondhand via Twitter about him staying, I heard the same thing on the opposite end of the spectrum. I heard he told everybody he was going UFA. So it's really convoluted, and you don't know what is true and what's not. And I think the only way you find out is whether he gets moved before February 25th. I know that Jan, people like Pierre LeBrun and Bob McKenzie are making references to the fact that, you know, Bobrovsky's value might not be as much as you think it is, based on the fact that he's not having a great year. And how many teams out there need a number one? A lot of teams need backups. A lot of teams need a fallback. But how many teams need number ones?
Well, is Calgary happy with David Rittich? If they are,
no, he's the number one. That's the number one choice. Right. We won't come up with that.
Right. So that would be probably the more likely place if he went somewhere. That could be a team that has interest in him if they believe that Bobrovsky pushes them over the top. That to me would be probably the number one option. But I mean, you guys have also read. I'm assuming you read Porchline's, you know, article from yesterday. I mean, it says, you know, sources tell The Athletic that an incident happened sometime between the latter stages of Tuesday's 4-0 loss in Tampa and before the team flew home from Tampa International Airport an hour or so after the game.
And he got yanked in that game, I think. I'm pretty sure he got yanked in that game.
He did.
I think. Yeah.
He did. So maybe he made a comment after he got yanked, and the disappointment of getting yanked. I mean, he got yanked after allowing the fourth goal at 8:53 of the third period, the second time in 3 starts and fourth time this season he's been pulled. Rather than staying on the bench with his teammates, as Bobrovsky has done typically after being pulled, he went directly to the dressing room. And it's possible that maybe that partially created the incident where he showed up as coach by going into the dressing room as opposed to staying on the bench. Right. Maybe that was part of the rationale, and then it escalated from there.
Okay, and just to touch on this, because we're going to be using the rumor chart heavily today. You know, Eck has got 4 teams out there, and 2 of them, I think, in terms of percentage and in terms of likelihood that he would go there in a trade. 2, I mean, in my personal belief, don't make sense. St. Louis is not going to try.
One sec, sorry. I'm processing what Jan said in my head. And you know what? To be fair to Bob, what if he heard something and that's why he went to the locker room and they went to look at it? Like, that's something where we don't know. And since nobody's talking about this, what if he, when he got pulled, said, you know what? I'm going to the locker room because this hurts and this is why I was playing bad. Like, we don't know that.
Right, but if it was that, then I don't think there would be an incident here.
Obviously, right? Because we don't know. Right after the game ended, maybe the coach went in there and started arguing with him. And
that's possible.
Right, you guys know, so it just came out that Bobrovsky addressed the media after practice this morning, and supposedly his initial, his opening statement was, "I let my emotions get to me when I shouldn't. It is what it is. What happened? We cleared the air and we're ready to move on." So you guys can listen to the press conference again.
Definitely was between him and the coach. There's no question.
Right, but okay. So just referencing what I was talking about, in 2 of the teams that Eck has on the rumor chart, to my mind, make no sense. One is St. Louis, because remember, he's a pending UFA. If St. Louis or the other team is Edmonton, if they're interested in Bobrovsky, they can sign him in the summer for nothing instead of giving up massive assets. Now, Edmonton, you could say, well, Chiarelli might make that deal because if he doesn't make the playoffs, he's out. But I don't think that they're going to allow Chiarelli to trade future assets unless it's like a Jesse Puljujarvi, who they maybe have decided that they can move on from. I don't see them letting him make a major deal with his position in Edmonton being so tenuous. the Islanders have the best save percentage in the NHL right now with Thomas Greiss and Robin Leonard. So I don't see that happening.
That's not happening.
And San Jose, unless Martin Jones is hurt, and I don't know about, why would they've got Aaron Dell and Martin Jones? So unless they
Jones
think
hasn't been great, but he's also a guy that took his team to the Stanley Cup Finals years ago, and we know that he gets better at times, as the season wears on. And with Dell hasn't been great all the time this year. I don't have a problem with them going with Jones as the starter. I highly doubt they're going to bring in Bobrovsky in that situation.
Plus, they're close to the cap. Like, they're going to have to move somebody that just to make the space. A lot of those teams, unfortunately, don't make sense. There may be some.
But they're based on things that Eck has been told, so it's not.
Oh, I get it.
I mean, again, are you viewing Colorado with even though they have Grubauer and Varlamov as an option? Varlamov,
I think they should be.
They should.
And you want to talk about issues. We also have the Bednar McKinnon meltdown on the bench too.
A competitor. I don't think that was a big deal.
And again, that's because of the losing streak also, and tensions are high when it comes to a losing streak as well.
Yeah, Colorado's lost 9 of their last 10, so I mean it's understandable that frustrations are boiling over. And I'll just touch on these briefly. The Leafs beat the Devils 4-2 yesterday. Zach Hyman, who's a guy who is very criticized by a lot of Leaf fans, but very loved by Mike Babcock, was really a key player in that game. +4. The Marner Tavares combination had 3 of the 4 goals. The Capitals beat the Bruins 4-2.
I'm going to say something about the Devils game, Mike. I mean, John Hines got an extension, but his goaltending situation is decimated.
Kincaid actually played good in the second period in that game. He gave up a couple weak ones, I thought, in the first period, but he played really well and kept them in it the rest of the game. But yeah, I mean, I think the article that you wrote, and I think that
they are really in trouble for this year, and now for next year, is Mackenzie Blackwood the number one? Who's the number one in New Jersey next year? Kincaid's a UFA. Schneider's hurt. Who's the? I mean.
Maybe Schneider will be healthy at that point.
Maybe they should get Bobrovsky.
Well, I mean, but they can sign him as a free agent.
I'm saying maybe they'll be the team. Go ahead.
Jan, any comment on the Islanders 4-3 win over the Rangers?
Let's see. What can be fit for public consumption that won't get me in trouble? I mean, I thought actually the Rangers didn't play a bad game. I mean, they weren't particularly good, as I wrote in my blog, the first 2 periods, but they stayed with them. The third period, they dominated the third period over, and they, 17-1, and every Ranger fan, and Russ can probably attest to this, as they're going on and they're not scoring. And granted, Foster's goal was brilliant. As the period wears on, all of us are thinking, yeah, you know how this is going to end. Somehow, some way, the Islanders are going to get 1 or 2 shots, score a goal late, and the Rangers are going to lose. And sure enough, they lost 4-3. I mean, what my takeaways are, Neil Pionk needs so much work defensively, it's not even
funny.
Scary how much work he needs defensively.
I've been saying this all year, but Jan, people got enamored with him getting early points.
Right.
The same way they got enamored with Del Zotto getting early points.
Agreed. Absolutely. I mean, I know somebody made a comparison to Marc-Andre Bergeron on Twitter yesterday. I'm like, Bergeron had a pretty long and distinguished career.
Yeah.
As much as he's back from guys in the industry. But Pionk, he misplayed that horrifically. I mean, Stahl should have had his stick down and his body in front of Clutterbuck. Pionk was turned around like a spinning top.
Pionk is around the net. He has no idea.
No idea. He just needs so. And the problem is, to me, that gets on the coaching staff, and to me, that gets on Lindy Ruff if he's coaching the defenseman, because he has shown no progress at all defensively. And it also.
All right, hold on. We got to stop it right there. Remember last year I talked about it all year. What does Lindy Ruff do? We're back to that. We still don't know if there's anything appreciable.
Most of us didn't want him back. Most of us had no clue why he was brought back, and he hasn't done anything. So to me, one, it shows that Pionk hasn't really improved defensively, and B, what also it shows, and it's something Shayna Goldman's done on The Athletic, and I've written on my blog and others, it is really time to break up the Stahl-Pionk duo because it's not a good duo. The only problem is Clayson with Shattenkirk was a really good duo yesterday. It's a duo that a lot of us have been hoping would be matched up for a good part of the year. McQuaid has actually settled down Shea a little bit, where he's been better the last couple of games after looking horrifically. So if you're going to break up Stahl and Pionk and you're relatively okay with Clayson Shattenkirk and McQuaid Shea, where the heck are you putting the two? Who's he getting paired with? Who are you breaking up? And in my opinion, honestly, Pionk should be sat on Saturday. He needs a game or 2 off. to sit there and watch, and maybe he'd learn something from looking from the press box, considering you got $5 million in Brendan Smith sitting there already, and you got Tony DeAngelo, where you need to make a decision what you're going to do with him, because if you try to send him down, somebody's going to claim him, even though he hasn't been good because he's making so little money.
Right. So let's talk about one thing. I do believe that the Rangers are going to end the rebuild over the summer, but the biggest thing that they have to revamp is their defense. Their defense is a disaster right now, and I think they need to buy out Brendan Smith and just get over that. Nobody's going to want him at the rate he's at. Just buy him out and send him to Hartford, or buy him out and let somebody else pick up his, measly tab.
Can we send him to Switzerland like Kevin Klein?
Yeah. Listen, Kevin Klein was injured. Let's not
go. I'm being sarcastic, but
I know. Klein was a warrior. We like Klein.
Oh, I like
Klein. Can they move Mark Stahl?
No, he's got no movement clause.
Defenseman this year, Mike.
But he's been there. He's actually been their best overall. As scary as it is, look, we talked about the rebuild. You lost Girardi. Girardi's actually played fairly decently for Tampa.
Girardi's had a good year this year.
Aided substantially by the talent around him, and they don't ask him to do too much, and he's protected based on his usage. Ryan McDonough has been an absolute warrior this year, as per usual, and there's no question he's hurt this year. I'm telling you right now, the guy they're going to go after is Erik Karlsson.
I've been saying that all year. Yeah.
We know that Tampa Bay is where old Rangers go to die. So maybe
not to die. That's Florida's where old people go to die.
Well, what I'm saying is they take
of the National Hockey League.
They've taken Callahan. They've taken Girardi, and we talked to Kevin Allen yesterday, and Kevin said they're looking for a depth defenseman.
They're not going. The Rangers aren't trading Stahl though. They won't.
Oh, okay.
He's got a no movement clause. He doesn't have to go anywhere.
Right.
Okay. Let's.
I do think they'll go after Karlsson, but I do think they need to move Smith out. I still think they need to give DeAngelo a shot. I don't care what the fans think. There is something there. And Shattenkirk, he's just going to be a bottom pairing guy. You hope his offense kicks in.
I think there's
as Russ, as you know better than I do, it's $1 million arm, 10-cent head.
I think there's a good. I think there's a
tools, and he just makes stupid mistakes on the ice.
I think there's a pretty decent chance that Karlsson re-signs in San Jose, especially now that he's playing so well there. So, okay, let's get to our little game here, because I think this would be interesting, and then we'll take some of the comments from the chat too, Russ. So you sort of monitor this. We'll start with the one that I mentioned before we went live here. Peter, you play Kevin Cheveldayoff, the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets. Jan, you play Jeff Gorton, the GM of the New York Rangers. Kevin Hayes is the target. What would you offer, Peter, as an interested party in Kevin Hayes from the Jets?
What would I offer? Well, I mean, if I'm going to play Kevin Cheveldayoff, I have to talk around in circles about the process and how we're trying to do some things. And when it all comes together, we'll be moving players back and forth. Anyways, what would I offer? Well, I think the Winnipeg Jets will likely want to offer. I don't know if they want to sell their first this year. I'd be very curious to see what their level of interest is. Hayes is a UFA.
Yeah.
Young. He's currently in his underlying numbers, he's better than Brian Little. If the Rangers are truly going to go into full rebuild and look at, trying to be a team that's going to stockpile some youth and bring it up as they have older guys come off, I think they have to be open to some things. So in this case, I think Kevin Cheveldayoff would probably be interested in throwing out a second in there, not straight up for Hayes, but I think he'd probably want to give up a second. And I think he'd be interested in giving up a player like potentially a Michael Spacek and perhaps another conditional pick. Hayes is good, but he's not all world. And he's, and I think the Jets have a finite amount they want to give up because they lost to first last year.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can keep trading first for a long time and hope to keep your cupboards full.
Right.
He's a free agent. He's going someplace else. They will definitely not be able to re-sign him.
Right.
It's strictly rental. So I'm thinking that there's probably a second, a player like a center, like a Michael Spacek, and probably like another conditional pick involved. Maybe even another prospect in there too, if the Rangers are thinking of that. But
no,
it won't be Christian Vesalainen because they need him. They need to have one top guy coming through, and I just don't think for a rental of Hayes, which they can't keep. They can't. There's no possible way, unless they make other moves, that they can keep him on the roster. So he can't overpay for that.
Now, Jan, do you think that Gorton is looking like, I need to get a first-round pick in this deal, or can he take a second-round pick and a decent price? And I don't know what you would rank Spacek as in terms of, is he an A prospect, a B prospect? I mean, Russ, you know more than that. Is he? Would you consider him like a B,
a C level?
That's
okay,
what
he's
my view on this is the only way Gorton takes beyond the first round is if the prospect he gets back basically warrants him moving down to a second rounder. I mean, we talked Nash at the beginning of the show. You look at what Nash brought back last year in terms of players. That, to me, is kind of what the model that Gorton's going to use. And to me, given the interest level that's going to exist around the league, and Kevin Hayes, if he is end up being available, will get an enormous amount of interest around the league because, A, he's shown he can play well in his own zone, which is what he was known for originally based upon the defensive zone starts that AV had him use last year until the trade deadline. B, he can play on the penalty kill, which is another skill. C, he's shown now that he can score offensively and really be a true number 2 center. So you package all that together, and it's going to be something that draws an enormous amount of interest in the trade market. To me, the Rangers are going to ask for Vesalainen in a first. You may balk at that price, but to me, that's going to be the price. Secondary, and Russ, you tell me if I'm offline, if they came back and offered Niku, Appleton, and a 1, would that be enough to get Kevin Hayes?
No, because I don't even think they'd want Appleton. They have enough to cover them there. And Niku, it's not enough. I think
you got to remember, there's no possible. It's strictly rental. Boston could have re-signed Nash. They had the cap space. Like, comparing Nash and Hayes is like,
I'm just saying in terms of
we're talking bananas and
they believe the right piece, like, other suitors, Peter, the price will be
well, absolutely, and someone else will pay. The Jets can't afford to pay that.
I'm just telling you. I think here's what I think they would accept. I think they would accept a second and Dylan Sandberg. That's what I think they would accept.
Okay, and I'm not that sold on Sandberg, but I'll defer to you on Sandberg. To me,
he's good. He needs some work, but that's fine. I think they would take that.
I think that's fairly fair, and if it's around there, then I think the Rangers would do it. All right, let's take another one here. Russ, you be Chuck Fletcher, and I'll be Kyle Dubas, which means the glasses are the same.
Right.
The hairline isn't.
Right.
And we'll talk.
Go shave now and come back.
and we'll talk. We're talking Wayne Simmons here.
Right.
I think the Leafs desperately need a top 9 forward with a little more sandpaper, especially if they're going to play Boston in the first round. Now, Eck has Boston and Toronto as the 2 teams with the highest percentage. If they're competing against each other for a guy like Wayne Simmons, I mean, Simmons for Boston would basically just be adding to what they already have in terms of aggressiveness, to those type of forwards. So that would put them almost over the top in that respect. Toronto, I think, needs that guy, but they also, get ready to drink, they need that top 4 defenseman. I think they're keeping their powder dry for that. But what do you think, or if you are Fletcher, what are you asking for from the Leafs?
Well, to start the conversation, I'll say a first and Kasperi Kapanen. So now you go.
He hangs up the phone.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I don't think he hangs up the phone. I think you're going to.
Yeah, no, I think Dubas hangs up the phone at that point.
I don't think he will. I think you need to continue.
Well, okay. If I'm Dubas, I'm hanging
up the phone and then call me back. So then what?
He hangs up the phone. He hangs up the phone permanently, and he doesn't call you back.
And a first.
Yeah, they won't. They won't do that
for Wayne Simmons, a guy who could bring them to the Stanley Cup.
The only way that any kind of deal close to that happens is if the pick is conditional.
Well, okay, so you want to make it conditional?
Yeah, I would say it would be a forward prospect and a conditional pick that could go up to a first if they re-sign Simmons.
Okay, so you're saying not Kapanen though.
No, he's not trading. Andreas Janssen and a conditional pick.
No, I would want Bracco in a conditional. Are you
They might do that.
Would Rasmus Sundin be a guy that they would be interested in?
No.
Okay.
Jeremy Bracco and a conditional first. You could set the condition. You going to do that?
Yeah, I think the Leafs would do that.
Deal could be made.
Okay. So now, okay, I'll switch to being
wait, Russ, hold on. Conditional on what? Them advancing to the finals?
Them being able to sign him.
It could be both. It could be if he advances to the finals, it's a first. It could be if he advances to the finals, it's a 2020 first, and if they sign him, then it's a 2019 first.
Okay, got it. I just want to know what the conditions were. That's all.
Okay, I'll switch hats here, and I'll be Don Sweeney. Let's use Simmons as well, and you continue to be Chuck Fletcher, Russ.
Okay.
So what are you asking for from the Bruins for Simmons?
From the Bruins, I mean, I'll start with Matt Grzelcyk and a first, and then you tell me what you want to do, Don.
I don't know if he'd want to give up the first. I think he'd want to give up one of the guys that they picked in the first, aka Zaboral or Senyshyn. He's still young enough, still decent prospects. But I think Sweeney would shy away from trading his first.
Either one of those two. What about Vakanainen and a second?
I think they think Vakanainen's a future top 4 defenseman, so I think they would shy away from that.
What about Jeremy Lawson and a conditional first?
They would probably do that. I think I would probably do that too.
I'll do that deal.
Okay. All right. Let's go to somebody. Okay, Peter.
Making a face, but Peter, Simmons will be the best free agent on the market. The best traded guy at the deadline.
Yeah,
I'm not knocking Simmons. I just didn't know. I didn't hear the first part because it got a little muddled there. So I missed who you're trading Kasperi Kapanen for.
Oh, for Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm saying
I don't do Kapanen is that's who you're getting defense for.
Right, right, exactly. And that's the whole thing that mitigate the only way they will trade one or the other maybe in a Simmons deal if they've either already gotten the defenseman.
Yeah.
Or
I think there could be 2 deals and Kapanen's gone. The reason I don't think it's for Simmons, because Simmons is a free agent and and Toronto is not going to re-sign him.
Unless that there's only one caveat there. If they trade Nylander, and if Simmons, who's from Scarborough, decides he wants to stay in Toronto and play for the Leafs, like Tavares did coming back, this is the best opportunity for somebody. Yeah.
Other things have to happen, but if you're trading for Wayne Simmons, you're trying to find a little bit of the gritty sandpaper forward who still has some legs, still has some skill, and isn't a long-term liability on a contract.
That's why I think that.
But
that's why
you're not giving up a controlled Kasperi Kapanen straight up for him. It's just
right. No. That's why I think that the only way they trade for Simmons is if the pick is conditional, and the condition has to be them re-signing him, because then they could say, okay, the condition, it's a 3rd round pick and it's a first if he gets re-signed. Well, if they say, okay, we're trading our first in another deal, so we're not going to re-sign him, so we just gave up a 3rd and something for him. So that would be acceptable.
The challenge with a lot of this stuff, right, is where you're saying you're trying to guess what the value is, how to establish value without really hearing what anyone else could offer, right? So it's a bit of a funny game. Like, you have to sort of put your best foot forward without knowing anything,
right?
And I think it's funny. I haven't gone to look back at other trades just to refresh myself of value. I think we're in a trending scenario where some GMs are getting a little smarter about how they trade and what they trade.
Well,
and that I think this trade line, speaking about it, is going to be a little different that way, in that there's going to be a different type of thing going on. Like, I just don't think we're going to see ridiculous prices paid. And there always is 1 or 2.
Maybe or maybe not. It depends on the type of player. Like for example, in yesterday's column, I was basically listing the different prospects in the Leaf organization for potential trades, and level A, level B, level C, and what other deals, like last year, using the Ryan McDonough deal as sort of a blueprint, what it would cost. Now remember, Pietrangelo I think is a little better of a defenseman than McDonough, but they're at the time of the trade. Pietrangelo is 28 now; he's got a year left in the contract. McDonough was 28 last year, had a year left in the contract. I think they're both top pairing defensemen. Like I said, I think Pietrangelo is a little better, but they're comparable. And what Tampa Bay gave up for McDonough was an A-level prospect in Howden, a first, and Hayjack.
Right.
Because
hold on, it wasn't just McDonough because
no, but it was JT Miller too. But I had to separate what was for Miller and what was for. I said the second and the Mestikov was for Miller because I didn't think the Rangers were going to re-sign him, and the rest of it was for McDonough. And if you take that, then what the Leafs would have to trade for Pietrangelo would probably be Timothy Liljegren, a first-round pick, and another prospect. And I think they would do that for Pietrangelo. That's the only guy in this market I think they'll do that for. They're not going to give up 2 A-level prospects for anybody else in this market. No way.
Is St. Louis moving their captain though?
We don't know. But
I don't think they are.
I don't think they are, but I think the Leafs have to be prepared for the possibility, and we don't know what Doug Armstrong is going to do. So
no, we don't.
Okay. All right, let's use another one here.
Estimating the tiredness of what the Leafs may want by the time the deadline's there, because we don't know what kind of pressure Babcock's going to put on Dubas. We don't.
Well, he's already starting to, Russ. He's already saying heavy player in almost every press conference. So we know he's going down that road.
I just want to say this before. I know you have your mind made up on certain things, Mike.
Yep.
Don't be shocked if Shanahan backs Babcock on this. Don't be shocked if he makes him give up more than he should because Shanahan says, get this done, Kyle, at all costs.
Right, but I don't think he's going to spend significant assets to get those heavy players. Their fourth line yesterday was Parr, Lindholm, Freddie Gauthier, and Connor Brown. You could very easily replace 2/3 of that line with other guys that would make them a more effective line.
And we discussed this already, that if they're going to play Boston or anybody else that's a more physical team, they sure as heck better replace a large portion of that fourth line.
I'll take Brian Boyle right
because
now.
You're not going anywhere if you don't.
I'll take Brian Boyle.
Brian Boyle 2 years ago. You didn't.
Yeah.
No, Russ. He's not going to cost a second-round pick this time around. And if he does, I don't want him again.
Who's going to cost you a second-round pick?
Well, then I don't want him. It depends on what it costs. All right. Okay. Russ, you be Ken Holland.
All
right. Since Jan is off screen right now, well, Peter, you be Brad Treliving of the Calgary Flames, and we're talking Jimmy Howard here, where I think Jimmy Howard or Bobrovsky would solve the depth problem because Mike Smith is not dependable anymore with the Flames. So the question is, Russ, what are you asking for from Calgary for Jimmy Howard?
First thing is, do you know about the living conditions in Seattle? All right, never mind. Sorry.
Free fish every day with good coffee.
and you can visit Jimi Hendrix's grave and Kurt Cobain's.
So for Jimmy Howard, why don't we go with John Gillies and either a guy like Christian Dubé or a
Dylan Dubé.
Dylan Dubé, sorry. Christian Dubé is a former Ranger. So, yeah, go with...
Wait, I let go of my arm here, Russ. Like, you want them both?
Well, I'm going to offer somebody in there too, Peter, but you didn't let me finish.
Okay, sorry.
But I'm thinking, because I think Washington isn't going to do a simple deal knowing that Calgary really needs this. So I think you could offer... Howard, and you could probably offer them. I'm trying to think who in their system. Actually, technically, would they want Mike Green? They might.
Who?
Mike Green?
Yeah, but he's got a $5.25 million cap.
He's a UFA.
No. It was 2-year deal.
What's 2 years?
2-year deal. So, and he's been hurt for half the year. And he was hurt half of last year. That's the problem. But Peter, I mean, it's funny because when we talked to Kevin yesterday, and he was talking about Calgary and how they would be looking probably for a young goaltender in return, that immediately clicked in my mind. If they're trading Howard and Calgary is the team, they've got Tyler Parsons and they've got John Gillies, so I think that's a fit in terms of.
I will give you Nyquist and Howard for Dubé and
ding 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 ding.
I think we're close. Except I don't want to give up.
Right?
I don't want to give up 2 futures for 2 expanding 2 RFAs.
Well, they don't consider Gillies a future anymore, Peter, because they're not using them.
No. I know Gillies. I'm just saying. So I will give you. Sorry, I'm just going back and forth here. I'll counter that with. Hold on. Why is this not doing its thing? Hang on. Sorry, I just couldn't see because of someone here. I will counter that and give you a. I'll give you Dubé, and I'll give you Gillies, but I want you to throw in a third.
Okay.
Detroit's third is almost going to be like a second. So if they have an extra third from another deal, I think that probably would be okay.
I'd still do it. I'm filling needs.
And no, they don't, but they have an extra 2nd round pick this year. So that's why I thought, because they've got the Islanders 2nd round pick.
Then maybe they trade a third in 2020.
Right.
No. They can afford to give up their third this year.
Yeah, but they don't want to give up a 2nd round pick. I mean,
that's why I said the third. They've got 2 2nd round picks, so they can afford to get rid of the third.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's a done deal.
All right. Yeah. And Russ,
I think that's the first deal we made so far.
Yeah.
No. Well, no, we said Brocco and a conditional. Russ, check the chat, see what some of the people think. I just want a little bit of news here, not a big thing, but I think it could have sort of a domino effect toward the deadline. The Penguins have extended backup Casey DeSmith on a 3-year contract extension. Russ, to my mind, does that make Tristan Jarry available as a trade commodity before the deadline?
I don't know if it's before the deadline. They may wait until the summer based on their history of goalies getting hurt. If they want to make a cup run, they're not gonna deal them now. They'll wait until the summer.
Especially given Murray's history. Although it's kind of interesting. It's almost like, isn't that the similar kind of a deal that that Nashville gave you Saros also?
Yeah. Similar.
Smith is clearly in the plans, and Jarry clearly would be on the outs. But if Murray were to get hurt again, they need Jarry. Like, they don't have any place else to go. So I think that's a summer deal. But all right, let's see.
Yeah, we'll do one more of those GM things, and then we'll sprinkle these in and out over the next few weeks, because I mean, it's going to be. Yeah, I heard, like I said, I heard something on, and I never would dispute Bob McKenzie in terms of his contacts and his reputation. It's spotless, and I'm sure somebody told him this, but whoever told him this in regards to Michael Furland drawing at least a 1st round pick in a deal. I mean, I don't know what they're smoking, but I mean, I think he's a good player. He's a power forward. He's got size. He's having a decent year with Carolina. He's had decent seasons with Calgary. I can't see anybody giving up a 1st round pick for Michael Furland.
Sure. I want to let you know, Thomas Boyle has made a statement that Leonard is the best goalie in the game. Now, hope this continues. Eck would disagree with you. He likes
Yes.
I do feel like I need to tell you that. Nicholas McKinnon's like, what about Colorado? Bob, to the Avs for Varlamov. I mean, Varlamov would certainly be in the deal, but he's a UFA, so that doesn't really help Columbus. So now you've got to give me somebody, and I want somebody pretty good. I mean, I really do. So if you're giving me Bob, then
Makar?
No, they won't give up Makar.
Their second number one, not the non-Ottawa number one.
Yeah, give me the non-Ottawa number one. Yep, give me that, and I'll make the deal.
Wait, what's the offer now?
For Bobrovsky.
For Bob, a number one, and they'll probably ask for a prospect too, but a number one.
Yeah, I mean, and he's a UFA after the year, so it's a rental also.
Right, but Colorado wants to go further than just make the playoffs and lose in the first round. But it's going to be tough. I mean, they're probably going to face Winnipeg in the first round, or Nashville if Nashville falls back to second place. So I mean, that's either way. They're like Columbus in the Metro facing either Washington or Pittsburgh. It's like death by firing squad or death by hanging.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Esmir goes, Blackwood's promising. Yeah, we know he's promising, but he's already injured because he got used too much.
All right, one more here. Justin Falk. Eck has the Buffalo Sabres as the leading team for him. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I don't think the Sabres. I think the Sabres, if they make a trade before the deadline, are going to add scoring. They're going to try to add scoring because after Eichel and Skinner, there's not a lot of depth scoring wise. So right. I'll go with the second ranked team here, which is Toronto. And I think Falk is way down on their list of guys that they're targeting because he's the type of defenseman that they already have in bunches. They have Gardner and Riley and Dermott, who are more skating and offensive minded. I think they need somebody who's more of a two-way guy. But Jan, you play Don Waddell. I'll play Kyle Dubas here. What would you be asking for from the Leafs for Justin Falk?
I mean, I think we're going to get back to a lot of the same names that you and Mike talked about. You and Russ, I'm sorry, talked about. I think that's kind of where we're going to start being at. I mean, that to me, I mean, for anybody that Toronto wants, you're going to start hearing the same names over and over again. I don't foresee there being a material difference in terms of names. I mean, the only thing I would say is that given the blue line that already exists in Carolina, they may not be looking for an upper tier blue liner to come back in a trade. That may be.
Oh, I don't think they're going to be looking for a blue liner at all.
Falk has another year to go. He's at I wouldn't say he's at a reasonable rate, but $4.83 million per season is not overly draconian in terms of what the salary cap impact is going to be, especially with the salary cap going up. So to me, they need forwards. Carolina most certainly needs forwards. That's the guy that's the position that they're going to look to try to help in terms of their offense up front, right? They gave up Skinner, which is proven to be a kind of a silly deal right now.
Well, they gave up Skinner because they were cheap and didn't want to pay him. That's why.
Right. Well, again, he is not cheap. They didn't want to pay him, but clearly, given the way he's played, you can kind of argue that they didn't make the wisest move possible in terms of making that kind of trade. So I will say Kapanen is probably one of those guys that's going to be one of the guys we're interested, especially since the fact that Falk is signed for one more year and he's not just a pure rental.
Sorry, just read.
I'll tell everybody, if I was listening to Jan, I would have put him on hold and let him listen to the hold music because he wasn't getting to the point. And then I could get back up and say, I'm sorry. All right, so what do you want to do for a deal?
I said Kapanen would probably have to be the guy that they bring back.
Yeah, after you went around the mountain and a mountain.
And that's
I got to lay out the parameters why they're not going to go after a guy like Liljegren or one of those guys because they're not.
No, they're not. I mean, but the whole problem here, and I'll just bounce this off you both, Peter and Russ, is that Thomas Dundon has come out very publicly and said, "I want a scorer." And if he says, I want to score, the problem is, what is your definition of a scorer? For Justin Falk, who's 28 years old, who I think he's a decent defenseman, but I don't think he's as good as he was 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think he's in decline, but I think he's a top 4. I don't think he's a top pairing guy. I'm not paying 2 A-level prospects for Justin Falk, even though he's got a year left in his contract. So if I'm the Leafs, I'm not giving up Kapanen. I'm not giving up a first-round pick. I might give up an Andreas Janssen, but Andreas Janssen is 24 years old. And if you put him with skill, Andreas Janssen is going to score you 20 goals. I'm convinced of that. He's played with skill players this year. Once he did that, he started scoring at a very regular pace. But it's all a question, Russ, of whether Dundon believes Andreas Janssen is a scorer.
True. I don't think he'll believe that.
So you don't think he thinks he's a scorer? Okay. I mean, Peter,
he doesn't want a guy like that.
So the guys he's playing with as opposed to being a scorer is what you're saying, Russ.
Yeah, I mean he
benefits from the line mates. That's why he's scoring. He's not the guy who's going to score on his own.
Right. Thomas Dundon look at Andreas Janssen and say, I don't think he'll score on his own, like you said. And I don't think that's the kind of guy I'm looking to market here, because I think that's the underlying message here.
There's not one player on the Carolina Hurricanes roster who makes over $6 million in AAV.
Yeah. Right.
I think Tom Dundon has a mental hurdle around $6 million. I think he has this weird thing around that number, and that's what he's willing to take on. So any player that's going to require more than that, he's not really interested in. And I think anytime you think about that, you have to consider, you think about trading with him, you have to consider that. That's why he's going to come in. He's trading a killer who's 6 more years, and he's going to get Pesci.
All right. Well,
I do have some questions.
Go ahead. Good, cool. Peter, if you have to drop off,
yeah.
No problem.
From El Guapo, he's wondering who the Kings should trade. Honestly, I think they should trade Kovalchuk, and I think they should trade Kyle Clifford. Beyond that, I don't know if they'll do much more.
You know,
every time I hear
Muzzin's playing well, they're not trading Muzzin.
Okay.
Every time I hear El Guapo, I think of the line from Three Amigos. Yes. I'm going to fill you up with so much lead that you'll be able to use your you-know-what as a pencil.
But those are two guys I think they could trade. Clifford doesn't make too much money, and he's a veteran. They look for guys like that when you're going into the playoffs. He's not going to do the Kings any good the next couple of years.
El Guapo. Go ahead. Sorry.
And Kovalchuk was a mistake, and I think they could still move him to somebody and get a decent return.
I think LA is going to move one of Muzzin, Martinez, or Phaneuf.
Julian wants to know from Peter is Peter still here?
No,
yeah, we'll try to answer. Go ahead.
I'll answer it because I know about him. What are the thoughts about Laurent Brossoit? Here's the thing. I've been watching him for years. I got to know him a little bit at like the NHLPA rookie photo shoot. So I made sure that I was watching him. He's improving every year, and he is the big goalie that you sort of look for. I think he's in good standing with them. I do.
Okay. Any more questions or? We had, by the way, while Russ is looking that up, we had a minor trade in the NHL today. The Leafs and Senators, which are that's pretty strange trade partners. Morgan Klimchuk, former first-round pick, who the Leafs just acquired a couple months ago from Calgary, was moved to the Sens for Gabriel Gagne.
Gabriel Gagne at one point had a little bit of a little luster to him. I still think that's a better deal for the Leafs. I think Klimchuk is just working off reputation at this point.
And Gagne scored 20 goals in the AHL last year for Belleville, but is having a rough go this year. So maybe it was change of scenery. Plus, he's a big kid, 6'5", 214 pounds. The Leafs, I think, need a little bit of size, but I think they need size at the NHL level, not at the AHL level. But okay, one or two more questions, and then we'll end the show.
There's another small trade.
Go ahead.
Cody Golubev to Boston for Paul Carey.
Who for Paul Carey?
Cody Golubev.
Oh, Cody Golubev.
That is a small trade.
That's a small trade that I want to.
I said it was a small trade.
No, I'm agreeing.
Kevin Hayes fit in Nashville, Esmir wants to know. I do think he'd fit in Nashville. I do think for the Rangers, I mean, Nashville's an interesting one. I mean, they're not going to give up anybody like Fabro, but
that's the guy who I would want.
Yeah, but you're not getting him for Kevin Hayes.
Well, okay, let me.
I'm getting.
Let me ask you this, Russ, because I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if it's Peter. I think it was Peter that brought it up yesterday that there was a little speculation out there about Matt Duchene and the Predators. Does David Poile give up? I don't think he'll give up Tolvanen. I don't know, but would he give up Fabro?
And now, because Tolvanen didn't even score in the World Juniors, he might give him up now.
Okay, so you think he would give up Tolvanen for Matt Duchene or Fabro for Matt Duchene?
I think he wouldn't give up Fabro. I think he would give up Tolvanen, and I think he would have to give up something else.
Wait, so so again, just to make sure you're viewing Duchene as a major tier above Hayes right now, just to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm level set in terms of how you're comparing the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's above him. I don't know if he's that much above him anymore, but he's above him.
Well, if you're saying Tolvanen and another piece of it, you're saying, and you wouldn't even talk Tolvanen, I'm assuming, for Hayes, you're basically establishing how big of a spread there is.
No, I didn't say I wouldn't talk Tolvanen for Hayes. I didn't talk Tolvanen. I said I would more, if I'm the Rangers, I would more target Fabro and try and if they say no because it's a rental, then I'll give you Hayes in a second for Fabro.
And when we're talking about Hayes and Winnipeg, and the point that Peter was making is they can't give up Vesalainen because they need a cheap Vesalainen to be on their roster next year because they have so many other guys that are expensive.
Russ, let me ask you this question.
Vesalainen, he could be added for the playoff roster.
He could too.
Yes. You may be able to better than I would. With Vesalainen, or with everything that went on with Winnipeg this year, with him in and out of the lineup, going to the AHL, coming back, going overseas again. Do you know what's going on? I mean, is there a difference of opinion in that organization?
No, I don't think
discrepancy between the two sides that they're not getting along and he has a potential of staying there?
No. It's not that. It's just they wanted to give him a taste. They know that he's hungry and he's close.
Right.
It's the same thing like the Leafs are going to go through with Sandin. They're just trying to see the best fit for him.
Well, the funny thing is that came out a couple days ago, Russ, and I just found out about it yesterday. Sandin came back from the World Juniors with a I think it was an elbow injury, and he's out 4 to 6 weeks. So, that could be and you know what? If that's the case, then he probably either stays in the OHL, goes back to Sault Ste. Marie, or goes back to the Marlies. And the same thing happened with Liljegren last year. Yeah. He missed like half the season, or he only played like 40 some odd games. So that may have been the plan to sort of just like ease him into the North American style. And the injury was just a coincidence.
Now I do want to give Esmir some sort of award for the worst possible trade ever.
That's a bold statement there, Cotton.
Drew offers I don't know if this was the trade or not.
So is Peter Chiarelli in the chat?
Yeah, Drew says a second and Kapanen. Esmir goes from Philly, Wayne Simmons, Sanheim, and a 2019 second and a conditional first.
Oh my God!
What do you think of Travis Sanheim? I mean, he's having a good year.
Travis Sanheim is a former first-round pick and not a failed one. So no, I mean,
yeah.
And honestly, I really will be shocked if the Leafs trade Kasperi Kapanen. I think that I think that they want to keep him because the funny thing is the Kasperi Kapanen now has moved on down to the third line. Now he played with Matthews yesterday, so I'm sure Babcock will keep going up and back. But I think eventually it'll be Nylander to play with Matthews, and if Kapanen goes back and plays down in the third line. He's got 14 goals right now. I'm not sure he breaks 20.
Yeah.
And
go ahead, sorry.
And remember, last year he had 9 points. So we're talking about a guy who's going to have a good year, a good second year, full year in the NHL. You're not going to get major bucks for that. So, a 2-year, 3-year bridge deal probably in the 2 to 2.5 range is probably what Kapanen's going to get. The Leafs can afford that, so I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah. I'm being asked, I don't remember who it was. Who was this year's Paul Stastny, and I think it's Mark Stone.
So I think it's going to be Duchesne. Looks like whichever one doesn't resign, I think Duchesne is more likely to resign.
Stone's not resigning.
I'll agree with you on Stone because I think Duchesne has a better opportunity of resigning.
Yeah.
Can we ask the person what he means in terms of this year's Paul Stastny? Does he mean like the guy that nobody's talking about that gets traded? Because that's what Paul Stastny was. Nobody thought Paul Stastny was getting traded last year, and then all of a sudden he got traded by St. Louis.
That's why I think it's Stone, because everybody talked about Duchesne earlier. I think they tried to give Stone an offer. It didn't work.
I think they're both getting traded.
No, but I think what Jan said is, I mean, they have to go for the lowest salary. Duchesne will be the lowest salary, and I think they could retain him. I don't believe they can retain Stone with the year he's had. Right. And based on that, you've got to trade him because he's an expiring contract.
And Duchesne's a center though, so that immediately increases the value. All right, we'll stop it there because but this was good. We'll do this again. The fun thing about the trade deadline is speculating about what the trades happen, and then when the trades happen, analyzing what happened. So for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, for Jan Levine, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.